Hi, everybody. I am Andra Annette, and I want to welcome you to Healing from the Inside Out. And today I have a special guest with me, Paula Kramer. So she's speaking from Triumph, and you'll understand a little bit more about that. So she's an international best-selling author. She's an international speaker. She's a TV producer. So she has a lot of things that are going on, but I think it's very important for people to see that trajectory, because sometimes people feel a loss of hope and they see a place they'd like to be in their life and they don't know how to create that bridge. And this woman really embarks on that journey in her life. She's been through a lot of emotional trauma and she's really decided to change her trajectory and teach other people how to do that. So please help me welcome Paula Kramer. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello. I I want to say that professionally I am Paula M. Kramer because Paula M. Kramer comes up much faster on Google for me than Paula Kramer. There are a lot more Paula Kramers in the world than
Okay.
me. So, well, you'll find me under Paula M. Kramer. Yes, and I didn't actually choose the journey. I was forced into the journey. I just my mother tried to kill me twice, so I started out as very young, having to figure out how to stay alive. And I learned soft skills very, very young because I never knew what to expect from my mother. She tried to kill me when I was a baby. I have memories from being a baby of my mother smothering me and holding my legs down. But because she was the memories, I split them into separate physical, mental, and emotional pieces that were all clues trying to get me to pay attention, but I couldn't grow up with my mother thinking she tried to kill me because that would have made me insane. But my father loved me and kept me sane while I was trying to navigate. But my mother was a narcissist, so everything revolved around her, and she abused my father and all of my five siblings as well. So my father became a quiet alcoholic and he just was doing his best to survive. We were all doing our best to survive with my narcissistic mother, who became narcissistic because her mother was a paranoid schizophrenic. My grandparents were living in Hungary at the beginning of World War One. After World War One, they found themselves living in Romania, where they didn't want to live. So they emigrated to the United States. They first went down to Missouri, where we had some relatives. They had some relatives, then moved to Chicago, where they knew no one. And so my grandparents started raising two children without any family support. And my paranoid schizophrenic grandmother was probably more schizophrenic because of the stress of living in a new country without family support and trying to survive. She threatened my grandfather with a butcher knife because of her paranoid schizophrenia. And she convinced him to leave the family. Why stay if you're going to die? So then my mother and her older sister grew up with this mother who had no idea how to nurture. So my mother had no idea how to nurture when she started having children. It, she didn't know what to do. It was terrible. She did horrible things to all of us in different ways. I understand why, but I ended my relationship with her 23 years before she died because it was never going to improve, never.
Let,
And
let, let's take a look at that. So because you speak to triumph and you've changed your life, right? And
right,
for some people we do have to make that disconnect, right? When things
right,
are
right,
when things are no longer serving us, we have to sink or swim, right? And you
right.
chose to swim. So I totally get that. I understand that the relationship was toxic, but take us a little into what it was like for you when those emotions started coming up and you started
Oh,
remembering those stories that you would had blocked out
I
for
had,
safety,
right,
apparently,
for
to
safety, right. Well, they came out, bits and pieces of the memories came out in nightmares. I had a lot of nightmares as a child. My most frequent nightmare, probably starting shortly before I was a preteen or when I was a preteen, was that I was walking into this huge cavern with someone by my side. I never saw the person at my side. I don't know who that was. But we walked into this huge cavern that was dark, except in the middle of the cavern was a small structure that looked like a bird feeder. It did not have water in it, it had a flame in it. As we walked up to this flame and got closer, I saw a skeleton shrinking into the fire. That was the dream. And I had it more than any other dream in my life. It was horrible. It scared me awake every single time. Then the nightmares changed as I got older. And as a child, by that time, I had learned to make positive connections with other adults because my father couldn't. He loved me and he did what parents should never do. He told me I was his favorite child, but that saved me. Knowing I was his favorite child saved me and made living with the terror of my mother possible. But I made connections outside of my family. The first time I felt safe, well, I didn't feel safe with my father because he was a quiet alcoholic who would go into rages whenever he couldn't keep his feelings buried. My mother didn't tolerate anybody's feelings, so he had to bury his own, which he did in alcohol. But occasionally, they came out in rages that could last for hours or days. And so I was afraid of my father, too. I was terrified of my mother. I was afraid of my father. So I felt safe for the first time in my life when I was 7 years old in second grade with my first second grade teacher. She got married during the year and moved away. But for the first time in my life, I felt safe with an adult. And then later on in fifth grade, and then I somehow I remember a good relationship with after that with Sister Mary Scholastica. I went to a Catholic grade school and Catholic high school. Sister Mary Scholastica was principal, and somehow we had a good relationship. I don't remember much about that relationship, but I remember having very warm feelings about her, and I knew that I could be safe with her too. Then in fifth grade, I said something to Sister Vianney, who was principal at the school from fifth grade through eighth grade. Whatever I said, I have no idea what I said anymore because I'm 74 now. So who knows
God
what I
bless you. Look fabulous.
thank you. And she started having me come to her office for conversation. People get called, kids get called to the principal's office and they go terrified because it's the principal. I got called to the principal's office and I remember sitting in a chair across from her desk having wonderful conversations and laughing. I don't remember what we talked about anymore, but that those conversations, that relationship made a huge difference in my life. I have never felt the imposter syndrome. When I first started hearing the phrase imposter syndrome, I had to look it up because I've never felt like an imposter anywhere. Having those conversations with the principal of the school, the most powerful person in the school, made me feel that I was equal to anyone anywhere. It doesn't matter what their position is, I feel equal. I know I'm equal. I'm equal in humanity. Everybody is equal in humanity to
I
everyone.
agree.
When you go into a room, remind yourself that you're equal in humanity to everyone there. And then you can start to feel equal in other ways. And that happened just because I was reaching out to people, trying to make positive connections as a
You
child.
spoke of you spoke of soft skills. Can you explain a little bit about the soft skills for anybody who's listening that might not
Right,
understand what you're
right.
talking about?
It's the ability to make connections with other people through positive statements. That's how I would define it. And so I grew up making positive statements as much as possible to anybody. And as an adult, I try to have conversations wherever I go when I'm out in public. I look for people to have conversations with. Once I was in a store and I was looking at the lines. There was long lines in every every cashier station, and I looked for someone who might be interesting to talk to. There was
Mhm.
a woman in one line who was wearing overalls, and so I thought, she'll be interesting to talk to. And so I waited for an opportunity. I forget how I started the conversation, but I started the conversation. We ended up talking about churches and stained glass windows. It
Oh,
was a wonderful conversation.
but
And
that's nice
before,
that you're getting out there and you're
right,
meeting positive
right.
people.
And before she finished checking out, I told her what I had done. I said, I looked for someone who would be interesting to talk to. I decided it would be you, and you were interesting to talk to. So
That's
she left
wonderful.
feeling really good.
I wanna ask you a little bit about some of the other things that happened to you. So I know that you have dealt with a lot of different traumas
Right,
in your life. So it's
right.
not it
Yes,
wasn't just this. You
right.
had
I,
you
I wear this because when I was 12 years old, a boy in school pulled my chair out from under me. I landed hard on my tailbone, and my spine started hurting right away. That medical professionals misdiagnosed that injury for 33 years. And because of those misdiagnoses, my pelvis shifted out of place first, then my hips, then my vertebra. I've lived with bone shifting out of place for 63 years. Things are better. I finally got the correct diagnosis in 1996, and I got it because I was trying to help other people. I had been told I was permanently disabled, nothing could be done. And I started doing talks at for women's groups. And I did a talk 2.5 miles, 2.5 hours from where I live in Wisconsin to a business women's group. And I couldn't just stand because that meant excruciating pain in my spine. So I asked for a stool, and I had a lumbar back pillow that I brought with me. And when I did my speech, I sat on the stool because I couldn't just, and I explained to them, and I said, this is what happened. If you have children in your life, please tell them to never pull a chair out from under anyone, because a chiropractor told me that some people are instantly paralyzed. I'm lucky I can walk. I've lived without a placed bones for 63 years, but I've been able to walk that whole time. After that talk, a nurse in the audience came up to me and gave me the correct diagnosis. None of the people who were paid to see me, none of the medical professionals who were paid to see me, said anything about my spinal cord. Not one of them. This nurse told me that when I hit the floor, my spinal cord tensed up. And it was the tension in my spinal cord that was causing the pain. She said her husband was a chiropractor who knew an unusual chiropractic technique called neural organizational technique. And people had told me various cures for my pain over the years. As I drove home for that 2.5 hours, I thought about it and I decided I'm going to cry. I decided I would try it. So I made an appointment to see that chiropractor, and he ended 33 years of pain in my spine in 1 hour. 1 hour. And it wasn't a normal chiropractic adjustment. He had this laser pen. He told me that my spinal cord was attached to my spine in two places, a muscle right up here and a muscle at the base of my spine. He took that laser pen, shined it on the muscle at the top of my neck, which was also tensed up, released the tension in that muscle, that released the tension in my spinal cord, and my pelvis moved forward.
unbelievable.
33 years, just that. And the
Leave it
pain,
to a nurse. I'm a nurse.
right? A nurse, right? I'm so glad. And the information about neural organizational technique never came into my life in any other way. It was that meeting or never. I would still be in pain.
See, God puts people in your path when you need them. I think I don't uh, your higher power. I don't know if you believe in
Right.
religion or
I
not,
I
but
believe it.
I think that well, you went to Catholic school, so I was kind of hoping it was still there. So, um, but I think that things come into our life for a reason. I think that everything happens to us for a reason. It's not always good stuff that happens, but we become who we're intended to be based on those situations. I think that everything is bringing us to where we need to be in our life because now you're speaking out and you're helping all these other people, right?
Right, I am. I think that the law of attraction depends on our own action, words and actions. I attract that kind of success because of the things I say. I give people reasons to give me success.
Well, that's a wonderful way of looking at it. Because but wait a minute there. I'm pretty nice to people and I'm not exactly where I want to be yet. And I am that positive person. Every morning I share positivity everywhere. I believe in that. I think that what you put out in this world comes back to you tenfold.
Yes, what
I
you put
really
out
do.
comes back. Right, right.
So if you could tell our audience one thing that through all of this that you went through that left a lasting impression on you that would help them move forward through, because we're talking about abuse here, we're talking about emotional neglect, right?
Mhm.
We're talking about medical neglect,
Medical, right.
you know.
And my husband died when our daughter was 8 months old. So it was
Yeah,
also
I
parents.
totally forgot you had so many things,
Right,
and
three.
I said wow.
By age 28, I had three long-term life tragedies to cope with. So when looking back on it now, it often astonishes me that I did it so well. But I did so well because I did was I created success in small spaces. That's what I call it. You create success in small spaces. And that's what soft skills do, saying positive things to people. Create success in small spaces, and they add up to the victories of life. That's how I got here.
I think that's so profound. It's such a beautiful way of saying that. So
Right.
I mean, because you've been through so much and you're still so positive and so giving. Tell me a little bit about the TV producing. What kind of shows do you produce?
It's my own show. I am redoing it. It's called Relationship Reckoning. This background is from Relationship Reckoning. It's about deciding if you should stay, limit, or go from a relationship. And I'm redoing. I'm just getting ready to send the redone intro. I have this show because of my soft skill abilities. My first book, I'm a member of Women Speakers Association, and they have a series of books called Voices of the 21st Century. The first book I was in, I've just been in my fifth. The first book I was in was Resilient Women Who Rise and Make a Difference. A woman named Natasha Williams was also in that book, and she was a top, let me see, she investigated fraud. She audited fraud around the world. And she was I got this email saying she was going to be doing a webinar about fraud that sounded like I could understand it. So I attended her webinar. I could understand it and she was funny. And so I made that connection with her. And she's also a single mother. We met, somehow we connected with a woman who was doing podcasts she started a podcast during the pandemic. And so I was on a panel with Natasha and a divorced mother. I'm a widowed mother, was a divorced mother, and Natasha was a never married mother. And so it was a wonderful panel discussion about single parenting, single mothers, and what we face. So we had that together. And then Natasha had a serious medical problem, and I alerted everybody in the Women Speakers Association. I kept track of her, I encouraged her. And as she recovered, she decided to launch a television network because when you face death, she came very close to dying. It was really, really close to dying, but she survived. And so she thought, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And she started a Boss Ladies TV. And
Wow.
offered me a TV show. So I'm doing relationship reckoning to help people figure out their relationships. I stayed connected to my family decades longer than I should have. My mother convinced everyone to ignore what I said and discount what I did. So the way to protect myself emotionally was to walk away from everyone in my family. I didn't walk away till my father died. He died in 1980, 1981. And then I stuck around. I kept trying, but it became obvious and I just walked away from everyone. And then I learned about DISC behavior styles, DISC, and Springer guiding values, and came to understand every relationship in my life. So now I'm trying to help people understand their relationships so they can decide if they should stay, limit, or go. And that's, I mean,
I think that's beautiful, and I think a lot of people stay in relationships that have really outdone their time.
right,
Right.
right, right,
Yes, I think
right,
we do, and I think sometimes those are toxic to us as humans
right,
that we need to let go of those relationships that aren't serving us. We do grow. And
we
as we
do.
grow, some people don't are not growing, and they stay in that same emotional space, and they can't be supportive because they really just don't get that you want to
Right,
continue to grow as a person. It doesn't really matter what you're doing in life. We have so much knowledge. It only makes sense to me, this is just my perspective, that we take advantage of that knowledge and share it with other people, because knowledge is only valuable if you share it with
right,
someone else,
right,
right?
right,
you
right,
know, it's not knowledgeable, if you keep it all to yourself and you don't tell anybody else, right? So
right.
even like books, when I finish a book, I give it to someone else,
Right. Mhm.
you hope they want to read it, because in those pages they might get lost in those stories, and it might take them to another place too. So, but I've been doing the same thing 40 years. And Paul, I still continue to educate myself in the
Me
same
too.
career. You
Me too.
have to, because if you stop educating yourself, you stop growing, you know?
Right, right, right. I'm currently reading. Everybody should read this book. I'm currently reading How to Negotiate. Well, no, Never Split the Difference. How to Negotiate as if your life depended on it. It was written by Chris Voss, who from 2003 to 2007 was the FBI's lead kidnapping negotiator internationally around the world. He was the lead negotiator. And he said the FBI learned to develop empathy because that's what saved lives. And they develop tactical empathy, meaning they get inside the kidnappers' minds to understand what they feel and their
Mm.
perspective, and then they know how they can change the situation. So
I
it's
love that.
right. Highly recommend it. I'm still in reading it, but it is a
You'll send me a text so I can remember the book.
right, right. I will.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a long day, so as the day goes on, there's less things that my brain will hold.
Right, I know.
I've been
Right.
I
I
get up every
know.
morning at two
Right
thirty.
there.
By this time, I have another show tonight, and he talks about how to wind down your body the last 20 minutes, and
Oh,
I'm gonna let him show me how to do it, because he's at that time where I'm just starting to wind down. So
right.
so I'm gonna teach me whatever you can, right?
Okay, I will. Actually, there are talk about in my TV show and in the course I teach, I talk about disc behavior styles and Springer guiding values. There are 6 values, and we have a guiding set of values that guide our decisions. And my first guiding value is helping, and my second is knowledge. So I help people with knowledge.
Oh, well, that's great. You got to say, I think you did send me some of that information. I think I have that, so I'm gonna look into that. I love to just acquire knowledge, right?
Right,
There's so much beauty and so much worldly knowledge out there that I
right.
think it's a shame to waste it. So there's so much I want to do. I'm 58. I'm not in my 70s yet, but I'm heading there. And I don't want to look back at my life, Paula, and say, if only I did. because
Right. You don't want
as
to.
an yeah, but as a nurse, I see people in those final moments, and they all have, I wish I would have.
Right.
They don't, I rarely hear I've done everything I want to do in my life. So I'm trying new things, I'm doing new things. I started publishing um and doing all these things for myself, and um because that's what life's all about.
Right.
Learning to stretch your imagination and put yourself out there and do the things that really
Right.
bring you joy and happiness, because life is very short.
Yeah, sure. The only birthday I was afraid of was my 60th birthday because I was afraid that hitting 60 meant fewer opportunities. But then I hit 60 and realized I could make my own opportunities, which is what I've been doing. And you can make opportunities in really simple ways. I remember I like to make connections, and I made a connection to a woman in Kenya who I saw a video of her somehow, and she was making cotton menstrual pads for girls so they could stay in school. I connected with her. I put the post on my best and brightest or ordinary's Facebook page because the best and the brightest are the people who see a problem and find a solution. And they're very often ordinary people. She invited me to join Africa's Leading Ladies. It's a completely different Facebook group now, so I don't recommend it. But back then, I made a connection with a young woman who said that she was tired of the gender stereotypes at work. She lived in Kenya. And so I contacted her and said, I could do a workshop for you for free to help you deal with gender stereotypes. And she's agreed. And when we set up the date, we got there. I had invited only her. She invited a friend. And I said, okay. Well, the first person and she took the course, she liked it, and then we sort of faded apart. But the second woman, the woman she invited, stuck it out. I had offered monthly meetings so that we could talk about strategies. The first meeting we had, her name is, I can't believe I'm forgetting her name. Her last name is Marah. I'm 74.
It's okay. It's
Those
okay.
moments, she said, I don't really want to talk about that. I want to talk about personal issues. So she talked about personal. She was going through a really hard time. And I told her, make one positive statement to yourself every day. Her first name's Rebecca. Rebecca Murrah. She said, make one positive statement to yourself every day. That's your homework. That's it. Just do that. 1 month later, we get back on, and she told me that she had quit her job. She had moved away from her mother, who had destroyed Rebecca's first college level diploma because she didn't want Rebecca to be accessed. She had moved away from her mother. She had moved to Nairobi to live with her uncle, and she had gotten another job and she had started a new college program. That was after a month, a month of making positive statements to
See,
herself.
see the difference.
7 months later, wait a minute, it gets better. 7 months later, we kept in touch. We're still in touch. She told me that her uncle traveled. He was in business. He had been in the government, Nairobi government. He was in business and he traveled. And she got lonely when he was gone. So she decided she would start a nonprofit to help people with what she knew. And then she would have people to talk to and laugh with. And so when her uncle came home from a trip, she told him her plan. He said, in 2 weeks, we'll have a meeting with my colleagues from the government. He said, write it up. She wrote it up. They helped her get started, and she launched Peace with Land Kenya,
Wow.
which the government of Nairobi has approved as a nonprofit in Nairobi. So all I told her to do was to say one positive statement to yourself every day. And she launched Peace with Land Kenya, which will eventually help people around the country. They were in a few counties when they first started. She's now taking a master's course in managing nonprofits. And this all comes from my first offering a free workshop to her friend and then telling Rebecca, just make one positive statement to yourself. You can have more influence than you realize. I've influenced peace for an entire country.
I think this is beautiful. We do have to wrap this up though. So I would like to ask you that question again. If you could tell people one thing that you think could really help them on their journey in life, what would that be?
Speak positive words to yourself and speak positive words to other people. That's it.
I love that. Thank you for joining us on this week's session of Healing from the Inside Out. We've been with lovely Paula M. Kramer. Don't forget to put that M in if you wanted to come up on Google. Thanks for joining us, guys, and have a great evening.
Thank you.